translator is not here, so I have to replace her, even though Telesur hasn't paid us for around 3 months. We're talking about the independence, the celebration of independence in Venezuela, led by Simón Bolívar. Now Venezuela still fights imperial forces. Yesterday, Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza in a press conference said that Venezuela is under a medieval kind of siege. This is not a race, it's a marathon, an indefinite marathon. President Nicolás Maduro is about to be victorious. Now we're gonna understand how the United States is fighting these attacks. Venezuela continues coup attempt in Venezuela. Sorry, they don't pay me, so I don't care. Welcome to another show of Critical Moves. We start now. On the 5th of August, Donald Trump signed an executive order that formalizes and makes official an illegal blockade against Venezuela. It's a decree signed against the South American nation, and this makes it more difficult for the country to develop economically. Even that decree is named blockade of assets to Venezuela, but when we analyze it, it blocks everything to subdivisions, agencies, banks, government, embassies, ministries, everything. This affects the whole people of Venezuela. The United States is trying to turn Venezuela into a geopolitical war territory against Russia and China, just like in the Cold War, where they did it in Afghanistan, Nicaragua, and the other areas. They're trying to do the same now in Venezuela. That's what Jorge Arreaza stated during that press conference in Caracas. I repeat, Telesur hasn't paid its employees for 3 months. For 3 months, no salaries. Anyway, Delcy Rodriguez says, the United States says that this executive order is against the regime and Nicolás Maduro. But this actually attacks the whole people of Venezuela, all of its economical areas and social areas. I'm gonna quote Mr. Bolton, because it's very serious what he said. He said, we are taking the steps to deny the access of Maduro to the global finance system and to isolate him internationally. This embargo is not being widened up. It's forbidding Venezuela to buy products or goods. All the goods of Venezuela will be frozen. Everyone who trades with Venezuela will have problems. This is what is called secondary coercive measures that attack the Venezuelan people, trying to create starvation. But it doesn't only apply to Venezuela, but to the whole world if they trade with Venezuela. The United States is a global reign that governs the world regardless of the orders of the UN. The United States have even said that the orders of security in regards to security of the UN are not going to be followed by the United States. Mr. Arreaza said the same. He was thinking that we are jeopardizing the rights of the world, the main fundamental basic rights of the world. Since April 30 until now, this has happened. On May the 1st, a block of air operations of the United States to fly under the 27,000 feet in Venezuela. On May 7th, there was they took away the sanctions against Christopher Figuera, one of the leaders of the coup in April 30. On May the 10th, an increase of the sanctions against companies that take petroleum or oil from Venezuela to Cuba. On June 27, they put sanctions over officials of the electric and finance sectors of Venezuela. On July 30th, sanctions against Cuban metals. On July 19, sanctions against officials of the military intelligence due to alleged violations of human rights. And on July 19th, the inclusion on the On July 22nd, a new entrance of an illegal airplane from the United States to the Venezuelan territory. On July 25th, sanctions against people linked to the delivery of the collapse. El día 1 de agosto, Trump amenazaba con una cuarentena y el día 2
And on the 2nd of August, there were new sanctions on the FANB for alleged violations to human rights. And all of this was informed on August 5th, that there was a signing of the new order that now formalizes this blockade against Venezuela. Let's go to digital websites. It's the ABN, it's the state organization, because there are sectors that are against the government, against the whole people of Venezuela. There are some people of the opposition that recognize that the people of Venezuela are being affected. The economist, who's the dean of the economy faculty of the University of the Catholic University, he says that it's evident that the United States wants a change of government without any access to currency. There are no ways out. The people are cornered. And this is what he admits. And on Twitter, another economist, Mr. Economist Riveros, says that the actions taken against the companies will affect people. The director of Capital Market says that there will be affections for the exportations of oil and as well as all of the imports on the private sector. With the blockade, you could affect the private operations as well as the currency change. These are three opinions of economists, and they're specialists on the field who have been clearly identified with the right wing of Venezuela. Let's go to Sputnik. It says The executive order of Trump allows the United States to sanction anybody who supports Maduro. These days, the group of Lima is holding their meetings in Peru. And in this meeting, the security advisor for the U.S., John Bolton, said that the most important statement for the executive order is that it will sanction anybody who supplies anything to Venezuela. This means that third parties are being warned not to work with Venezuela, not to have any type of business with Venezuela. The moment to act is now, because that's why the government of the U.S. will be firm against Maduro and assure a peaceful transition to a new government. To Russia, we say, don't make a bad bet twice. This is in a very threatening tone. Okay, this is what happens on websites. There are some news that come out of the resistance of Venezuela. Yesterday, Chancellor Arreaza said that just as bad as these sanctions are, just as bad is the resistance of our country. Luis Tavera, what can you tell us from Caracas? Hi, everybody who's watching Telesur. As you can see, I'm at the heart of the capital of Venezuela. Today is a very special date. We're celebrating the 200th anniversary of the Boyacá battle. Everybody who's here is not just to remember this heroic date, but it's also to support the nation today. And they want to say to the U.S. government that they do not agree with the measures against the economic development of Venezuela. We have spoken with some of the people here. As we told you, we're here at the heart of the city of Caracas. This is a very historic place. There are many stages that have been built, and many people are standing there and express why they disagree with these executive orders issued by the U.S. And they say that this blockade affects the stability of the people of Venezuela, and that the statements of John Bolton contradicts itself when it says that this order is not aimed at the people. But on the other hand, it also threatens anybody who gives supplies and who works with Venezuela, because they might suffer any type of sanctions. So here, all of the Venezuelans are together and gathered to say that the only thing that they're doing is officializing the sanctions against Venezuela. And what they do is that they don't let the government go ahead, carry on with all of their social programs, like the CLAP, which benefits thousands of Venezuelan families. The chancellor spoke in numbers, how much the U.S. is staying in terms of money. And he said that it's billions of dollars, that by now the numbers are $30 billion that the U.S. is taking over Venezuelan assets. I would like to talk with some of the participants. We see that a lot of the military people are here, and this shows the union between the civilians and military that has been created in this government. This has been one of the characteristics that characterizes the Chavistas' forces. And there's a spirit to continue to go on and to resist, just as the president has said. This mobilization will walk until the cemetery, National Cemetery, where there will be a speech also held by the government. And they will state clearly what the defense will be. Yesterday, we heard the chancellor who gave an advance, saying that it has the support of many countries, and above all, they have the support of all the people of the country. And to oust a constitutional president is not the solution. And this celebration here is to commemorate the 200 years of this battle, and this state reminds us all that they can all work ahead and they can overcome. Thank you, Luis, for your valuable material. These are the facts that you can see on the streets. And I would like to ask myself, this was posed by an analyst before. For every aggression, there's a new way of defense, of resistance. So we would like to ask our guests, is this a weapon to sabotage us and to sabotage the dialogues that were held between the opposition and the government? This is what we will be asking our guests when we come back. Whoever is not against this is just in favor of the suffering of the people of Venezuela, who does not disagree of this blockade against Venezuela. They just want an invasion in their country. Venezuela, the epicenter of the political outcome. As always, we've seen in recent days, there's a panorama that shows the increasing project against Venezuela. And at the same time, it translates as the failure of a fake government. Let me present you our guests. After the last elections, where Maduro was ratified as a president, the United States has tried to affect their legitimacy. Additionally, it has been ratified that Venezuela, there's a tension against them. Now there's a dialogue between the opposition and the government. There has been a rigorous procedure by Norway. Additionally, there has been support by Barbados. Venezuela has always showed their peaceful dialogues policy, and they use the presidency of the non-aligned governments. This is the second most important platform after United Nations. In this meeting, there has been a total condemnation on the U.S. policies that go against the UN Charter and international human rights. Just recently, there was a summit on the leftist movements, and many agreements were reached. Let's analyze as we promised with our guests. We have Vladimir Adrian. He's an international analyst, and he's a professor in one of our universities. and William Serafino, who studied politology, and he's the main editor at Misión Verdad. He recently was awarded the Journalism Award for this year. Let's begin to analyze this formalization. Is this a strategy that was already underway? Well, the first thing I want to say is that this is a conflict, a geostrategic conflict, where you see U.S. as a power that is against the rising, the growing, the development of Russia and China. The second one is on an economic front, and then the first one is the political control, political and military control. So to this we have to add the appearance of other regional actors like Iran and Turkey that has made a shift in recent times. And all of this is part of a composition of a multipolar world that even Panama is betting on this, in which Venezuela is part of this group, is part of this position. And obviously, all of this with the legacy of President Chavez, where they think of a multipolar world. Venezuela was in the 20th century, and further on we can see it in detail. We were a neo-colony of United States, where they just put and took out presidents however they wanted, and they managed the internal policy. And the local capitals were also at their disposition. So, of course, when Donald Trump says that Venezuela used to be a prosperous country, for who, of course? For the U.S. and for those classes who wanted to control Venezuela, and they took over our resources. There was an analysis of all of the minery and petroleum resources, and they have much more information that we ourselves have. And of course, this is one of the main elements of this geostrategical conflict, because if they're in control of the Bolivarian nation, of course they could move it however they want. And now, undoubtedly, this was not how it used to be before. And this is what we can see that is behind all of these actions, because for the past 20 years they've been trying to control the U.S. again. Well, even President Chavez had to give his life for this objective. I'm sure that Chavez was killed. And now this continuous aggression that is now has been taken to a point that yesterday or some days ago, this new executive order, what they do is just formalize the blockade that Trump had already spoken of, and he had announced, and Mr. Pompeo had announced in Argentina when he said that, among other things, they were not going to let Maduro govern. So obviously, this is part of a plan. Well, this is like the fourth war, because the third one was the Cold War, and this would be the fourth World War. But they're totally different. This is a new type of war. And what they want is to keep the supremacy of the U.S., and not only the U.S., but all of the Western capitals. Okay, you said that there's a geopolitical war. But before, let me show you what Jugada Crítica has prepared for us. Venezuela, epicenter of a historical dispute. In this, we see the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. It has abundant strategic resources. It has a privileged geographic position in the Greater Caribbean and South America.
Y posición geográfica privilegiada en la plataforma continental caribeña y en el sur del continente que comparte con Estados Unidos. Con una revolución
it is a victim of an integral war. This is not a conventional war. It's a multiform, which is also fought on many fronts: financial, economic, psychological, social, ideological. Venezuela resists internally, but additionally, it has some allies from some of the biggest powers that are big and medium, that are struggling for a multipolar world. So we see Russia, China as superpowers that are great investors in the region, and we have Turkey in the Middle East. We also have Bolivia, Nicaragua in Central America, and Cuba in the Great Caribbean, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, who have manifested their solidarity in the diplomatic front and against all of the things that the U.S. has done. United States, it's the main aggressor. It now uses sanctions against the countries that are not aligned with their interests. Their largest interests are what they say is that all options are on the table. Ever since January, with the self-proclaimed Guaidó, with no previous election, this international actor was in front of a continuous coup d'etat, and the objective is always to oust the Bolivarian revolution and start a neocolonization of the region. Of the main allies, they have the right-wing governments of Brazil and Colombia, Chile, Argentina, Peru, Spain, Israel. This last is their armed country. The countries who help, well, Europe is divided in many of the countries, and it's not so clear to be autonomous from the U.S. interests. In October, Argentina and Bolivia will go to elections, and any results will influence this map. Okay, let's go with William. We have a starting point, and I would like to ask you, is this only because of the strategic richness and the strategic position of Venezuela? Well, yes, I think that the X-ray that you did of the international policies are incredible. And this is also the product of frustrated attempts against Venezuela. They have bad calculations, and they had thought in 2019, and they have not been able to achieve their goals. And now they're going with the blockade, and only the Congress can give all of these approvals. The executive order of the blockade up until
posesión o control o administración de los activos
even the Guaidó so-called government had a limitation to take over some of the goods. So there's an escalade of the blockade. Let's remember that we went from specific sanctions against PDVSA and Citgo, and then we had to other petroleum and gold mining, and these generated income. And now with this new blockade, it's formalized. But I think it also has to do with other ramifications. Let's go to the next point where Guaidó has not all of the doesn't have all of the followers that he had at the beginning, and the coup has now been dismantled because they thought that in the upcoming elections up until then there would be enough uproar, and that with all of the pushing of the U.S. behind them, that was going to generate a coup d'etat that was immediate. But now it's the 8th month, and the president is still in the dominating position. I think we cannot leave Citgo on the side. Okay, we'll go there in a minute. Let's go to our other guests. This formalization of the sanctions may affect all of the population. But anybody can infer that whatever is coming, whoever sees this can see that what is coming is there's going to be a strong damage against the common citizen. Following this line that William just made, that has to do with your question, which is, what does this executive order have to do with this? With the continuity, and how does it affect the people? Well, I have reviewed the executive orders, and specifically the one that was issued yesterday, and in one part it speaks of an explicit blockade of food, clothing, and medicine destined to the people, to the civil society. However, Jeffrey Sachs said in these days publicly that evidently all of these sanctions that the U.S. are destined to the people, because the idea is to remove the support of the people to the revolution, and that the only way was to hit the people. But this constitutes a fact that is a crime against humanity. Because if you're affecting a country just because you have some differences with another government, far from affecting the government, you're affecting the civil society. Here there's a truth, and there's also another vision that's different. They're submissive to the interests of the U.S. And in sum, this is something that goes against the human rights of the people of Venezuela, and goes against all of the international legal framework. It goes against the UN Charter, too. Even this organization, the OEAS, the so-called organization, when you read the charter, it says something so totally different to what they've been doing throughout their history. So none of these principles have been applied. And the positions of the U.S. have been thought of through the CIA, the Pentagon. What they want is to isolate Venezuela from the world economic framework. What happens with the dialogue, William? Let's see what our chancellor said yesterday. Not even 1,000 Trumps, 500 Boltons, 300 Pence, Guaidos, Abrams will make us leave the table of dialogues. We're there in good faith to attain a permanent table of negotiation, to reach several agreements with the opposition of Venezuela to guarantee peace and stability of the country. So, is this dialogue trying to be aimed at? Yes. Yes. It's a missile cruiser against the table of negotiation. William, we have very clear actors and intentions. Just recently, there was a conference in Lima for the democracy of Venezuela. Of course, without the participation of Venezuela. And then there was a statement of John Bolton. There were even threats against China, Russia, and other actors that could help or give assistance to Venezuela. We could even see the sequence before the executive order. On August 5th, Bolton, who had already had some time in Peru, he said, we will not allow, or we do not agree with any electoral process to allow Maduro to continue in power. So this is a personal bet to see if they can overthrow the power balance in Venezuela. With this executive order and with this position of John Bolton, if you see it in terms of the negotiation table, what we would think is that there should be the lifting of the sanctions. However, the Barbados, I think, is advancing. And this is totally negative for the U.S. policy. So there might be a bit of despair seeing the upcoming agreements on Barbados. Yes, I think that may be it, because the procedures that were established in Norway have been advancing. And there might be, if there might be an electoral process and that would offer a way out of all of these sanctions, I think Bolton reacted with despair when he said that he was going to impose. What he did was to take away one of the legs of this table. And it's also to not support the opposition of Venezuela. Because to continue the future dialogues, there must be respect to the outcome. And Bolton, we know who he is. He's the one who led the war against Iraq. And he's doing the same thing. He's doing the same thing with Venezuela. He wants to fulfill the same role.
también está en el marco de un nuevo paradigma.
Now there's
No
also
nuevo,
this
pero
conflict with
digamos
China,
representado por Bolton recientemente, que es este paradigma de política exterior de el
and this
realismo ofensivo.
paradigm
Es decir,
of
aquí hay un
external
conjunto de
foreign
maquinaciones
policy
geoestratégicas y geopolíticas que se están dando en el escenario venezolano.
that
Y
is
justamente en
that
este
has all
planteamiento de realismo
been showed
ofensivo de
out
Bolton
with
es
all of the sanctions with
prepárate para la
Venezuela.
guerra porque la guerra es inevitable.
And what he's saying is
Entonces,
that prepare
justamente creo
yourself
que
for war
Barbados entra
because it's
bastante bien en este
inevitable.
paradigma belicista.
Y ahora sí les permito adentrarnos a un punto
Okay,
que
now let's
sé
go to another
que
point
ellos los dos quieren hablar, el
that I
robo
know
del
that both
Citgo
of
o
you
el
want to
robo del
speak of.
siglo. Si acaso hay una
This
piratería
robbery
continua
against Citgo.
legitimada en todo esto.
Is there a
Pero primero tenemos que hacer una
legitimate
pausa.
robbery here? We'll be speaking of this after our pause.
Venezuela y el golpe continuado,
Venezuela
epicentro de una
and the
gran batalla
continuous
geopolítica. Nos vamos a
strike
otro
against
punto,
them.
otra
We're going
arista
to
de
a
esta
new
jugada
point of
crítica, el
view,
robo del siglo, piratería
and this is
legitimada.
all
Hay
of the
diversos
robbery
recursos
against
que están en
Citgo.
riesgo.
Esta política de bloqueo
This
extremo que se ha
policy
servido
of
sobre
blockade
Venezuela, muy
extreme
similar
against
a la aplicada a
Venezuela,
países como Cuba,
very
Irán
similar
y
to the
Corea del
one of
Norte, ha
Cuba,
significado un
Iran,
robo desfachatado de bienes
and
económicos
North
propiedad del
Korea
Estado venezolano,
has
por consiguiente del pueblo
implied to
todo,
take over
valorados en
some
más de
of the
20.000 millones de
resources
dólares. El caso
that
Citgo es
are up to
emblemático.
more than
En
$20
2008, el
billion.
gobierno venezolano expropió a la empresa minera canadiense
In
Cristales, el
2018,
proyecto aurífero en la mina Las
they
Cristinas,
took all of
por no
the
cumplir con
mining
protocolos
programs.
ambientales mínimos. La empresa extranjera ha
And now
buscado
this
durante
foreign
años en
company
cortes estadounidenses
has
un
been
fallo
fighting
judicial
in
favorable a
foreign
la
courts.
apropiación de la venezolana Citgo para darse por indemnizada.
And now they want to go
Finalmente,
after
en 2018, el
everything
juez
that
Leonard Parr
belongs
del
to
Tribunal
Citgo.
del Distrito Wilmington del estado de Delaware
In
ordenó
Delaware,
el pago de
Wilmington,
$1.400 millones por proyectos cancelados.
there was
PDVSA
a
introdujo en la Corte Federal
there
de
was
Apelaciones de
an order
Estados
to
Unidos un
pay
recurso
some
para
money
dejar esto sin efecto.
to
La
Venezuela
Corte
for all of the
rechazó el recurso.
unconclusive
Recientemente, la vicepresidenta
projects.
ejecutiva
However, this
Delcy
was turned
Rodríguez
over by another
informaba
court.
que la canadiense nunca
Then
tuvo derechos mineros, ni
Delcy
títulos
said that
legítimos
there
sobre
was
las
never
Cristinas. El gobierno de Estados
rights
Unidos
over
decidió
mining.
asumir como parte
So the
interlocutora por
US
Citgo a la Junta Edihot,
decided to
designada por
take
el
over
ilegítimo
Citgo
Guaidó, pero además
at
el
the head
supuesto
by
procurador
Guaidó.
designado,
And he
José
was
Ignacio
alleged
Hernández, es uno de los abogados que participó
Mr.
en el
Hernández
pasado
is
como
also
cliente de Cristales en
one of
detrimento de los
he
intereses
has a
del
conflict
Estado.
of
Fue su
interest in this.
interpretación la que permitió el
It
triunfo
was
de la
its
transnacional en Delaware.
interpretation
Lo mismo fue
that
contratado por
helped
la empresa de vidrios Owen
to have a
Illinois,
ruling
pero no solo
against
Citgo,
Venezuela. But it's
confiscada
not only
ilegalmente
Citgo.
para ser entregada al
They
gran
also took
capital que
over
mantiene estrecha
assets,
relación con la derecha venezolana. Es también el robo de
property
sedes
of
diplomáticas en territorio
of
estadounidense. Y es haber permitido al equipo
diplomatic
usurpador de
offices
Guaidó pagar a los
abroad.
acreedores 6% más de lo que ha
And now they
correspondido
pay
en estas últimas
6%
semanas.
more than was
Advertía el ministro de
legitimate.
Exteriores de Venezuela,
Up until
Jorge
now,
Arriaza,
Jorge
regalan los
Arriaza
recursos del pueblo venezolano a sus amigotes.
says that they're giving
Bueno,
away
sigamos analizando
the
junto a
assets of
David
Venezuela to their friends.
analista internacional, investigador en geopolítica, y a William Serafino.
Here we have our two guests that are both international
Y además
analysts.
hace parte del equipo de Misión Verdad. William, ¿tú
William,
querías decir algo sobre
you wanted
Citgo?
to say
Y luego
something
le doy
about
la palabra al
Citgo.
profe.
Sí, lo que yo quería decir es que explica muy bien
Well,
la
what I said is
naturaleza
that
y la
this
direccionalidad
explains
política
the
de
nature
de la última orden ejecutiva.
and the direction
El
of
tema
this
es
last
hay que reconstruir
executive order.
rápidamente
We must
ese,
recall
el tema de Citgo, ¿no? Que desde el año 2017,
that
recordemos las
since
sanciones de
2017,
prohíben cualquier
it's prohibited
repatriación de dividendos por parte de Citgo a
to
su,
bring
a su
back
casa
any
matriz.
money from
Y
Citgo to
fundamentalmente
Venezuela.
En 2018, creo que en el mes de mayo, si no me
In
equivoco,
May
se emite
2018,
otro decreto ejecutivo
there's
que
a new
impide que
executive
Citgo pueda ser
order
utilizado en operaciones financieras o colaterales.
that doesn't allow
Luego, en el año
Citgo
2018, a raíz de esas
operate on the
presiones del
financial
Departamento del
terms.
Tesoro, ya amparadas en la orden ejecutiva del año 2017, comienzan a haber embargos selectivos a
And then
Citgo.
there's selective
Citgo comienza a tener
embargoes,
problemas para financiarse con cartas de crédito,
so they
comienza a
cannot
tener
use
problemas para
any type
adquirir
of
petróleo
banking
en
system
México o en otros países, es decir,
or
hay un conjunto de trabas y
to put petroleum in any other
complicaciones en su proceso
country.
operativo
So there
que
were
buscan
some
ir
complications
degradando y
in the
socavando
operative
la
realm.
operatividad de la empresa fundamentalmente. Pero cuando llega Guaidó la cuestión se complica.
But when
Yo creo
Guaidó
que
arrives
ellos,
to this,
tanto
the
la
things
Casa Blanca
get
como los
complicated
planificadores locales tenían la idea de que
because
se
they
podía
had the
realizar este
idea
robo, que aparte lo podríamos ver como un pillaje colonial,
that maybe they could
que se
take
había
over
realizado
all
este
of
robo y que
this
como ya estaba por caer el gobierno,
since the
iba a
government was
pasar,
about to fall.
Desapercibido, que iba a ser una cuestión de trámite.
This
Resulta que
event
no
was
es así.
not going to be perceived by
Cuando
anybody.
se da la autoproclamación de Juan Guaidó,
And when Guaidó
embargan Citgo
was
ya la primera
self-proclaimed,
vez con la inclusión
they
de
take
PDVSA en el
over
Listo Fact
Citgo.
y le transfieren ilegalmente
and they
el control de la
transfer
empresa
the control
a
of the
Juan
company
Guaidó.
to
Viene
Juan Guaidó.
esta decisión de la Corte
And this decision
de
of the courts to authorize this embargo over Citgo, there's a problem behind all of this. There's a struggle between Canadian capitals and American capitals. So what does this explain? That the embargo over Citgo just reinforces this blockade. So Crystal could not make effective any type of indemnation. And Juan Guaidó tried to say that the authorities of Venezuela changing the versions, but this was false. With this embargo, they just kill that dispute, saying, okay, well, the Canadians have nothing to ask for here, and from now on, this is our company. Professor Adrian, what would you like to add? Well, I think we have to go a bit back in history. When Venezuela buys Citgo and all of the companies that are part of Citgo, it was a time when this in the 90s. And what happened? That the intention was to privatize the petroleum of Venezuela. But there were these attempts of coup, and they saw that this was not possible. So what Citgo did was to say of the internalization of the petroleum activities. And the U.S. was about to put a lot of investment in petroleum. It had been like 25 years they hadn't made an investment. But of course, when they saw Citgo, that was almost controlled by them, they thought that they could refine petroleum in the U.S. And with that, Venezuela was a great ally to the U.S. when they accepted this. And of course, what they did was to take advantage of all of the infrastructure and all of the produce of Venezuela to take over, because Venezuela had the prime material, and to keep the company within the control of the U.S. Unfortunately, this is a document that I forgot to bring, where a high official of the U.S. says to Trump to be careful with what they do with Citgo, because Citgo, far beyond just investment of Venezuela, is a U.S. company that is operated since 1910. So, of course, undoubtedly, this must be added something else. Marco Rubio, 15 years ago, he was the first promoter of the capitals, of bringing capitals of the U.S. And he even said that Venezuela was the first and most secure provider of oil to U.S. So there were some investments of Chevron and Exxon. And what they thought was that the Canadian oil would be able to take their oil to get refined in all the infrastructure that was made up in the U.S. So what you can see is how they manipulated Venezuela to put investments in the U.S., saying that they were going to have great revenue. However, in 2004, President Chavez sent Felix Rodriguez sent if this really meant something for Venezuela, if there was some revenue. So it was the first time in history when Citgo gives more than 2% of earnings. And with that, they were able to avoid the bankruptcy laws in the U.S. So with that, it seemed that Citgo was going to do some lobbying. And they were going to distribute some of the others. But Chavez says, no, we should get out of the other assets that are not beneficial for Venezuela. And the second one was that obviously was why finance somebody who's attacking you? And this was not new because in this context of the refinery began in 1920, 1930, up until now. So to sum up, Venezuela gives them great financing, but overall it has become a security issue for the U.S. because they have tried to protect their own interests, and they want to keep a company that Venezuela bought. Let's hear the Chancellor once again. There will be much more needed than just an old-fashioned, lost in the Cold War, and who's obsessed with Venezuela, with old-fashioned ideas. Much more will be required than a John Bolton who's desperate because he's losing his job to vulnerate the capacity of resistance of the people of Venezuela. I'm sorry, our time is over. We will have to go to conclusions. Thank you very much for being with us. Let's go to final ideas.
Como hay mucho para hablar, ¿no? Cuando se investiga. Bueno, claramente un conflicto geopolítico.
There's clearly a geopolitical conflict, and Venezuela is at the center point of this. And this affects fundamental rights that goes against the UN Charter, the international law, and there's a new phase of a coup due to frustrated attempts before. And now there's a formalization of the sanctions, and they try to go back to old procedures of privatization. There is a crime against humanity with all of this. This is a missile cruise against the dialogue process that began in Oslo and with the support of Norway, and there might be some agreements. And with Citgo, there's a piracy going on against this company. There's a clear tension between capitals of the U.S. and legitimate interests. Thank you for being with us in Critical Moves.